alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Excellent.
So what can non-Muslims learn from Ramadan? Unitarian Universalists develop our faith by seeking out wisdom from the world's religions, including Islam, for both inspiration in our ethics and our spirituality. I'm embarrassed to say that my knowledge of Islam is small, but I'm likely not alone. As a Catholic Christian most of my life, exploration of the world's religion was not encouraged. In fact, interactions with other religions were discouraged as a threat to Catholic and Christian faith. It is wonderful as you use to embrace and incorporate the insights of the world's religions. It's awesome that Unitarian Universalism is not threatened by other religions, but instead seeks wisdom from other religions that can be incorporated into Unitarian Universalism. As a Catholic, I observed Lent, which meant for me eating less food and no meat on Ash Wednesday and the Fridays during Lent. In Catholicism, there's a lot of rules. So my perspective of fasting in Lent was to minimally meet those rules. I did not seek out any spirituality through my fasting. In fact, the fasting consisted largely of having to eat fried seafood and French fries dipped in cocktail sauce, malt vinegar, and ketchup. Since I immensely enjoyed fried fish, shrimp, and clams, there was no penance involved. Before exploring the details of the holy month of Ramadan, there are three broad conclusions that non-Muslims can take away from Ramadan. First, Ramadan is one of the major Islamic holy seasons, and as such, learning about Ramadan is a window into beginning to understand Islam. Secondly, Ramadan is an opportunity for Christian-oriented UUs to revisit their Lenten practices with the goal of renewing Lenten practices with new energy and seek greater spiritual growth in the Lenten season. Thirdly, celebrate Lent like Ramadan. We should find opportunities to make Lent a community-oriented season and not a season undertaken by individuals in isolation. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. During this month-long holy season, Muslims fast, pray, reflect, give alms, and celebrate community. Spiritual rewards are multiplied from fasting during this season. Studying the Quran is also encouraged during Ramadan. It's also the time to volunteer at and donate to charitable organizations. Today, I welcome the opportunity to explore Islam in one of its most important holy seasons, Ramadan. This holy season is a combination of Islamic Advent and Lent rolled all into one. It offers us non-Muslims the chance to revisit our springtime and Lenten spiritual practices and reinvigorate our spiritual growth along the parameters of Ramadan.
Testing. Thank you, Rick, for that reflection. I'm going to sit a little closer to the kids so y'all can hear me too. So good morning again. and good morning. So I was thinking, does this sound good? So I was thinking the other day of a question. You know, when I was in school, like elementary, so what is that, like kindergarten through 5th grade? Do we have anybody in elementary here? Okay, all right, so elementary, okay. So I was thinking that maybe when I was around elementary grades, maybe even around the time I was in middle school, so 6th to 8th grade, I asked myself, when in that time did I first realize that other kids had different holidays that were different from mine? Do you all know other holidays that people celebrate that are different from you holidays? What holidays do you know of? Hanukkah, which you said is one that you don't celebrate. Okay, so that's a really good example. I grew up Catholic, so we celebrated Christmas and Easter and other holidays that meant that you knew you were going to get a day off from work or school, or a few weeks of looking forward to rest. You know, a lot of things around Christmas, Thanksgiving time. So a lot of times I think when we think about the holy days, we think about November through December. Schools have always done a really good job at making sure that we give a lot of attention to these Christian holidays. But I think when I first started to notice and pay attention to those that were different from, who celebrated different holidays, was probably around when I was 12 or 13 years old. Is anyone here close to 12 or 13? Oh, I hear a little conversation. 10, okay. So around a few years after that, I think is when I really started to notice women in their headscarf, women in their hijab, students in hijab, maybe teachers, family members. So I knew that I had used my eyes to see differences in students, but it was really around that time when I noticed that it was connected to a different religion and different practices. When my kids were growing up, they were homeschooled for a few years, but when they started going to private school and then public school, we started to notice the struggle that a lot of other kids have, right? And that is when their teachers and other peers in class don't know that they're celebrating something. So for example, this holy month of fasting for Muslims, Ramadan, have you all heard of Ramadan? Yeah? So it's this holiday that lasts like 29 to 30 days. It's a long time. Can you imagine a holiday that is that long, that some kids, they just want to choose to fast, and their teachers don't know that they might be trying to fast during the day while they're giving them tests and a lot of homework. But kids, you know, sometimes they want to do it, and especially if they're older, so, you know, as they're getting maybe late middle school, high school, they start to really focus on fasting. So this is just one example of a conversation about what happens if we decolonize our calendar. So have you all heard of the word decolonize? Yeah? No? So this word decolonize means that we acknowledge, right? So we pay attention, we notice, and through our beliefs, through our voices, through our bodies, by changing laws in our country, that people deserve to have freedom in culture, in mind, financially, right? And part of that means that we give other communities public holiday recognition so that they can have, for example, so students who are celebrating Ramadan, which is this really long month, can have accommodations in school, for example, so that their grades don't get impacted by the fact that maybe if they're fasting, they can't focus as well because they're maybe staying away from food and water during the day, so they might have lower energy during the day. And maybe they can get some time off for them and for their families. And then after Ramadan ends, we Muslims celebrate that Ramadan was completed with an actual celebration holiday called Eid that lasts, you've heard of Eid? Yeah? That lasts 3 days. And Muslims go and they pray early in the morning, and that might be a school day. So they have to get special permission to miss school, but not all teachers might know that this is why they're absent. Not all of their peers might know that this is why they're not in school. So when we talk about other people's holidays and focus less on Christian holidays, focus less on November and December, holidays that are already normal here, we would call that part of the work of decolonizing our calendar, that we start to center other people and other communities that need to be learned about and respected, so that real day-to-day things like being able to have an accommodation in school can happen, and so our kids can feel like they can be open with their teachers about things. So what holiday did we just chat about? Ramadan. That's one example, right? There's so many more holidays, and I'm going to share a little bit more when we get into the reflection. Yeah. Diwali. Yeah, so she was sharing that her friend celebrates Diwali. So there's so many holidays, and I can't wait to share with you more of those holidays that are happening right now. Thank you so much for being a part of that conversation with me. If you will all please rise in body or spirit as we sing Our Faith is But a Single Gem, number 193.
Upon a rosary of beads, the thread of truth which runs through them supports our varied human needs. Confucian wisdom, Christian care, the Buddhist way of self-control, the Muslims' daily call to prayer are proven pathways to the goal. From many lips in every age, the truth eternal is proclaimed by Western saint and Eastern sage, and all the good, however named. Beside the noblest of our race, our lives as yet cannot compare. May we at length their truth embrace, and in their sacred mission share.
Thank you for leading us in that song. Please join me in taking a few moments to note that which is currently bringing joy or sorrow to our community. Let us begin by opening our hearts to joy, wishing everyone who has traveled to Cali, Colombia, a time filled with nourishing company and learning. Jane Alexander is home after having surgery earlier this week. She is resting and she is doing well. We are glad that you are doing well. And we have caring thoughts to share out to Tom Seibert. Tom's older brother, Paul Blaum, who lives in Georgia, is in failing health right now. We keep you in our hearts and thoughts as you travel on this journey with your older brother, Paul. I also want to hold space for it being about this time 3 years ago that we experienced our shutdown for COVID. I recall the place where I was when that news came, that we were going into lockdown, and I think it's important to hold space for the ways that our bodies remember and continue to remember COVID, and as we process what this time has meant for all of us. There have been lessons learned, some lessons still to learn, lessons that we are learning, losses that we might grieve for a long time. Losses transform us. We take people with us. Many of us experienced getting sick during COVID and experienced fear and noticed the vulnerability of our own bodies. And for some of us, there is no normal again. It's a new normal. It's an adjustment. It's creating flexibility in the system to be able to include people who want to join virtually, where our world is not just in person anymore. And I see that as a great way to grow. But of course, that came with a lot of challenges, and sticking to the theme of how students are impacted. We know students were really impacted by COVID, and the research of the impacts of COVID to come will continue as we see the impacts of mental health, from the isolation, the physical distancing, the loss of relationships, the struggle to reconnect, to make sense of it all, as people lost jobs, as people had to learn to prioritize what was most important, even though the system outside of us, this capitalist system, told us that we had to prioritize work, and we still had to put children or our students first. So I want to make space for what we've been going through in community that has impacted all of us, and of course, communities of color and our poor communities even more. So let us minister to each other this day and all days as we hold all of this and all of the losses, the health issues that we're all dealing with in different ways, the pain in our bodies. We hold space for that this morning. And I invite you to join me in a moment of pause and meditation. So if you'll take a moment to just get comfortable and maybe ground your feet on the floor if that feels comfortable to you. And just join me in breathing as we notice this pause and this silence. And if you feel comfortable, I invite you to try a 4-2-6 breath count. So we would inhale deeply and slowly count to 4, expanding our belly as we hold our breath then for a count of 2, and then slowly exhale through our mouth for a count of 6. So 4, inhale, 2, hold, 6, exhale, if that feels comfortable. And just continue to take a breath in and out and just notice the silence. Maybe notice the sounds that are still in the room. As we hold a pause in time that we can hold sacred. Breath in, breath out. The Muslim Sufi mystics have said much about silence, that silence can offer us a moment to take care of our own body and our own spirit. Rumi said, I took a view of silence and my tongue is tied, yet still I'm a speaker without a speech tonight. The Sufi Al-Kharaqani said, I sought wholeness and found it in solitude, sought well-being and found it in silence. I invite you back in. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing Fuente de Amor, Spirit of Life. We'll begin with me singing it in Spanish. The words are not printed on your order of service, so you don't have access to them. But then, right after I'm done singing in Spanish, I invite you to join in for English. So please rise in body or spirit.
Come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
You may be seated. Thank you. Thank you again for leading us in music this morning. So, this morning, again on my mind is we have a lot of holy days happening right now. And I'm so grateful, Rick, for your reflection, and to everyone for all the ways that you've participated in making today what it is. Because we live in a very white Christian-centered country, despite the history of indigenous religion and spiritualities, and despite the diversity and multicultural life that surrounds all of us, we see around us a world that centers still so much about the holy days and holidays around November and December. From Thanksgiving to Christmas or the Gregorian New Year. Again, students and schools who are part of different religions don't get days off in our state, the way that Christian holidays are the default. And the impacts of this are very real to a demographic like students, so to our youth and our children. But we have a really beautiful opportunity right now in March to appreciate an abundance of holidays that are important to so many other communities, including many of us here. It was last year when I served as your intern minister around this same time that I realized that we had the opportunity as Unitarian Universalists to really be present with other communities and what they find holy too. So I want to begin by naming a list of some of the holy days that are happening right now. And I invite you just to invite in presence as we hold some space for the things that are important to other communities. On March 8th, we had Holi, a festival of colors for our Hindu community. On 3/21, we'll have Nowruz, the New Year. This is the first day of the Baha'i calendar, also the traditional Iranian New Year. 3/22, Ramadan begins, a month of fasting from a lot more than food and water, and that will go through April 20th. And then that will follow with the Muslim holiday to celebrate Ramadan's completion with Eid al-Fitr, which is usually a 3-day celebration that will begin on April 21st. And then, as Rick shared with us, we got Lent, which began February 22nd and goes through April 6th. Passover for our Jewish community begins on April 5th. For our Sikh community, there's Vaisakhi, which is on April 14th. For our Buddhist community, on April 16th, we begin with a Theravada New Year. So it's 3 days for our Buddhist community. And then we'll also welcome an Easter and an Orthodox Easter. Easter is your birthday. Happy early birthday. And on March 21st, we have the spring equinox. So for our pagan and Wiccan community, and for many more of us here too who integrate the spring equinox, we are also welcoming the changing of the seasons. So happy and blessed Ostara. I shared that I'm serving as sabbatical preacher at the Columbus, Indiana church right now, and I shared these holidays, and I missed the spring equinox, and someone let me know that at the end of the service. And I immediately owned it. I immediately said, yes, I did. We were short on time, and I didn't have it organized well on my iPad, so I missed it. And I promised them that I would mention it today at All Souls. But I also told them, this is my growing edge. I come from Abrahamic faiths where we don't have recognition for pagan and Wiccan celebrations, where we're not as connected seasonally. We're connected in other ways, but we're not as connected seasonally. And this is a growing edge for me. And it's uncomfortable at times, but because it's a growing edge, it is easier to slip out of my mind. And it's okay for us as we're doing this work to own up to things as quickly as possible, is my opinion. Makes it easier. But it really opened up this fruitful, rich conversation that allowed someone else into my world, into my faith journey. That as Unitarian Universalists, it's different for all of us. So I wanted to open this conversation just enough to be able to dig a little deeper into what we connect with or have disconnected from, with the aim of finding more authentic connection ourselves to holidays. And hopefully through that, open the possibility to a journey where we can be more authentically present for other holy days that are not our own. I've said this a few times, that since I entered Unitarian Universalism, I think it's been 7 to 8 years now, I've noticed that we are a faith that is very outward focused. And that can bump us into things like trying so hard that it's so performative and it's inauthentic. And sometimes I think we leave ourselves out. That doesn't mean we stop focusing on the outward things that we're doing. We should continue to make things better for others, continue to show up for the social justice causes that we need to. We need to continue to be inclusive and name people's holy days. But I think we need to do this by inviting ourselves into the work authentically and in a way that honors other parts of our journeys too. So I want to invite in a question this morning of how do we invite in the transitionary work necessary to be welcoming of other people's holy days without it being performative, exhausting, another thing to check off on our list as Unitarian Universalists. Many here have identified with Christianity. I don't know your stories. I don't know your wounds. I don't know your joys around Christian holidays or other holidays if you grew up Jewish or Buddhist or humanist or atheist or agnostic or Muslim. But we all have stories around the holidays. But there's something that I've noticed in many of us, and that is the nostalgia that we often don't name. I had the gift of experiencing Ramadan from the young age of 14. Islam for me is a formative faith, meaning that it came at an early age that I carry so much of it in memories that are in my body. I have embodied it through the length of time of participating in these communal rituals like Ramadan. And many of you have these formative experiences in other faiths or spiritualities. And I have this connection even as I wrestle with my faith and Abrahamic faiths as a whole. So I want to invite you into a moment, just a brief pause, to ask ourselves a question together. So if you'll just take a moment with me and maybe just take a deep breath and ask yourself, what holidays are important to me? What holidays are important to me? Which ones might I miss? And what about these holidays connect with you or your family of ancestry? For Muslims, the month of Ramadan is not an isolated month. Muslims begin to look forward to this month many months in advance. We don't have the opportunity often to deepen our knowing of Ramadan in Unitarian Universalist spaces. There aren't enough UU Muslims. But we can learn about Ramadan. So right now, Muslims are currently in the lunar month called Sha'ban. That's spelled Shaban, Sha'ban. And many Muslims utilize this time to fast and to prepare for the month-long fasting that, by the way, not everyone can participate in the same manner. Women don't fast when they're on their periods. People with health problems where abstention from food and water will cause harm do not fast from food and water. Travelers are discouraged and exempted from fasting from food and water due to the hardship of traveling. Do you ever think that traveling is a hardship? Muslims say it is a hardship. Kids don't have to fast at all, but some want to because the community spirit is so strong that they want to do what their families and friends are doing. And I know that the communal spirit that Ramadan brings with it is very inviting, and people of all ages and even different faiths want to jump in together to connect via this communal energy that begins to show up even before the month begins. I have enjoyed looking to see what resources Unitarian Universalists have to where we talk about Ramadan in our communities from a place of Unitarian Universalism. And senior minister at Cedar Lane, Reverend Abi Janamanshi, talks a lot about Ramadan in his sermons. And I value so much his participation in a holiday that his father observed. But Reverend Abi is not Muslim. He's a Hindu Unitarian Universalist. And I want to share just a little part of a reflection from a sermon you can find online, and I got his blessing to share it. I think you can find it by looking up why I still fast in the month of Ramadan, but feel free to ask after the service. But he says, this is a little part, he says this, "And I'm fasting as an act of faith. Now, I don't know why Ramadan is the act of faith that has endured in me over all these years, because I'm not a practicing Muslim, but I am still very interested in the rigor of Ramadan, and I suppose that might be it. The rigor is the act I still seek. As part of this routine, but a part of this, I imagine, is like the basketball player who takes a shot beyond the three-point line with their team down by 2 points. As a buzzard sounds and tries to get it all back at once. Now I know the ways in which I fall down gloriously in the face of my beliefs throughout the year. And yet I wish to consider myself forgiven at least once each year. When I wake up early to pray and have a small meal at the sun breaking over the horizon, when I fast now, I feel closer to my faith than I feel before, and I'm performing it for no one but myself. In most instances, my friends and peers rarely know I'm fasting, or they often forget. To go about it in solitude is my preferred mode now, when nothing else matters but the month-long journey back to some spiritual center I've thought myself to be lacking or have found my way away from. And when the month ends, I don't return to a dedicated spiritual practice, and my life resumes as it normally does all the other 11 months of the year. But as for as many days as it takes for the crescent moon to unsheath itself, I will recite all of the old Hindu prayers I've skipped, and I will remind myself how to talk to a holy entity. I don't eat, sure, but the not eating has become the easy part, particularly as I've gotten older. To find the humility to imagine myself as small, minuscule in the face of something much larger than me is the hard part. And for me, that has little to do with not eating and more with the knowing that you could eat at any time, that you have the ability and privilege to fill yourself to gorge and you still choose not to. So I do this in the name of a faith that I am not a part of and yet have felt at home in, and that makes the act both more complicated and more fulfilling. With that reflection, I want to share with you something that you might not know about this month. And I invite you to consider this a spiritual practice for us as we get ready to also wish happy holidays to other communities. And also as we're doing the work and thinking of the Article 2 and what it means to change within our faith, how do we practice spiritually to prepare ourselves for change and transitions? So for Muslims, fasting the month of Ramadan is a prescriptive practice. The verse that Muslims look towards as the verse that has made Ramadan a tenet of faith is the following. In chapter 2, verse 183 of the Quran, the translation of the Arabic says, "O faithful, fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those who preceded you, in order that you may protect yourselves." So what does prescriptive mean? And it's exactly like what it sounds like. You go to your doctor for a prescription when you have felt unwell or need to get back to feeling better or having more energy, better focus. It's a focus on the cleansing of the soul. You might not do anything else throughout the year to adjust, to minimize, similar to Lent, get off Facebook. It's the goal that some people have for Lent. So you have this prescriptive month to try to get into a state of fasting. And a person might say, I am fasting, but not actually achieve the state of fasting until the end of the 30 days. I am now in a state where I'm truly fasting from food and water, maybe cursing, maybe slamming doors, not doing anything with your partner during sunrise to sunset, and so many other ways, and working on small goals. It might be hard until the end. And Ramadan doesn't look the same for anyone. And one of the hardest things that I think the journey includes for those of us who are more open to a more different out-of-the-box journey is that sometimes we get judged from inside and outside too. As Muslims, we think that a fast should look a certain way, and we try to tell Muslims that that's what it should be. But if I'm a Muslim with an eating disorder, Ramadan is going to look very different for me. And so by sharing that, I'm hoping that we can stretch in a direction from a place of curiosity and ease. And I want you to know this. I, as a Latina and as a Muslim woman, want you to lean in from a place of curiosity, not from a place where it's so hard for you and inauthentic, just as I want to be curious and lean in your direction to be open and hearing your stories about the holidays that you connect to. And I think that we do this by inviting ourselves into the actual work that we say we're here to do. So the next time that we wish our Muslim community a happy Ramadan, Ramadan Mubarak, being open to the possibility that we might in turn turn to you and say, what are you celebrating? What do you celebrate? So that we can build a stronger connection together. And I'd like to set an intention that one day, maybe next year, here at All Souls, we can bring in more of our Muslim community to share with us more about the holy month of Ramadan, as it shows up differently for everyone.
Each week, we gather together to align our giving with our values. We give to support the missions and ministries of our congregation and share half of our weekly offering with an organization whose values align with ours. This week, we are donating to the Indiana Muslim Advocacy Network, known as IMAN. IMAN is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that strives to provide Muslim Hoosiers with opportunities that keep them equally informed and engaged towards positive civic and political changes in the state of Indiana. One of their recent efforts was to partner with several organizations to host 3 summits surrounding the housing issue in central Indiana, where Hoosiers were invited to learn how they can help regarding the eviction issue. To contribute, You can give cash or a check into the collection plate, or if online, you can go to allsoulsindy.org, where you'll find a link that says, Give to All Souls here on the left side. It's beneath the description of today's service. Please indicate if your check is a pledge payment or if it is for Share the Plate, if you are paying online or using a check. Thank you for your generosity in supporting the mission of All Souls and for your continued love of one another and for this world. Take this moment to make your gift. The morning offering may now be given and gratefully received.
Thank you for all that you do. I'd like to end with this prayer. O gently kind Ya Latif. O gently kind Ya Latif. Bring us closer to doing the work of joining the inner and outer worlds of our hearts and our bodies, so that we can show up as our human selves to join in community with joy, with sorrow, with laughter, and all of our human self. Amen. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.